Look, Dragonkin the Banished is the kind of game that seems simple at first. You pick a class, smash everything in sight, and level up. But once you hit the mid-game, things get tough fast. That's why today I'm bringing you 10 tips that aren't those basic hints you see on the loading screen. These are the things that actually change the way you play. So if you really want to play better, stick around, because some of these can completely transform your gameplay. I'm Mary, and the video is about to start. If you're playing and feel like your damage has hit a ceiling, where no matter what you equip, the numbers stop growing, I need to tell you about symbiosis. This is the system that separates those who are just playing from those who are truly building a character. And the best part, or worst, depending on your perspective, is that most people spend hours in the game without even realizing it exists. The mechanic works like this. Within the ancestral grid, each skill has slots you fill with modifiers. When you reach 8 active modifiers on a single skill, something changes. The skill enters a state of symbiosis. At that moment, it stops being just your skill and fuses with your wormling's element. It's as if the dragon accompanying you starts directly fueling that skill's power, adding its element and multiplying damage in a way that no single modifier can replicate. The detail that makes all the difference here is that it can't be just any 8 modifiers. You need compatible modifiers, or links, that connect your skill to the wormling skills. This means building the ancestral grid correctly isn't about stacking everything you see. It's about thinking of the board as a circuit, where every piece needs to communicate with the next to complete the connection and ignite symbiosis. So, when you sit down to redo your build, don't first ask, which modifier gives the most individual damage? Ask, which 8 modifiers get me to symbiosis the fastest? This shift in mindset is what turns a decent skill into an ability that literally carries your character. Symbiosis isn't a bonus, it's a tier promotion, and once you feel its multiplier working, it's hard to play any other way. Once you understand how symbiosis works in Dragonkin the Banished, there's an extra layer that even I wasn't exploring properly, and it lives hidden right in your equipment. There is a phenomenon that advanced players called elemental double dipping. And when you understand what's happening under the hood, the way you look at every item you equip changes completely. The concept is this. When your skill enters symbiosis, it automatically gains your wormling's element. This means the game treats the skill as having 2 elements simultaneously, its original one and your dragon's. Here is the game changer. Elemental damage bonuses on equipment work separately for each element. So if you're using an item with a fire damage bonus and your wormling is ice-based, these 2 multipliers stack instead of canceling each other out or merging. In practice, this means you are purposely looking for gear that has a different element than your wormling. It's not a bug, it's a conscious build decision. You don't need everything to be the same element to be coherent. On the contrary, intentionally mixing elements on your gear while your skill is in symbiosis is exactly what activates the stacking of multipliers, transforming your final damage into something absurd. So next time you find an item with an elemental bonus different from your wormling, don't discard it without thinking. Depending on your build, that item could be exactly what was missing to take you from okay damage to the boss didn't even finish its intro animation. This kind of detail is what makes Dragonkin much deeper than it appears in the first few hours. There comes a moment in the game where you realize it's not just the quantity of fragments that matters, but their quality. When that click happens, you start looking at the ancestral grid in a completely different way. Divine fragments are at the center of this mental shift, and if you're still using them randomly without a strategy, you're wasting one of the most powerful resources in the game. The fundamental difference is simple, but the impact is massive. Common fragments roll the modifier level randomly within their rarity range. You could pick up a rare fragment, and it might deliver the lowest possible value. Divine fragments don't work like that. They always arrive at the maximum rank of their rarity. No variation, no luck involved. This means when you slot a divine fragment into the grid, you know exactly what number you're getting before you even confirm the move. Why does this matter so much in practice? Because many skills in the game have breakpoints, specific power thresholds where secondary effects activate or scale differently. If you are 2 or 3 points short of reaching one of these limits with a common fragment, you could spend hours farming in hopes of a better roll. With a divine fragment in the right place, you eliminate that variable entirely and guarantee the effect activates without relying on RNG. Therefore, the smartest way to use divine fragments isn't filling the grid indiscriminately. It's identifying the critical slots of your build first, the ones where a low roll truly breaks your progression, and reserving divines specifically for those slots. Treat every divine fragment as a certainty in a system that usually asks you to trust your luck. And in games like this, certainty is worth much more than any rare drop. When you start building a character, the natural temptation is to distribute attributes evenly, a little here, a little there, trying to cover all bases. But if you're playing as the Oracle, or any magic-oriented class, there is one attribute that deserves all your attention, and ignoring it is likely the biggest mistake you can make in the early stages of the game. That attribute is intellect. The reason it's so powerful for elemental builds goes beyond what the number on the screen suggests. Investing heavily in intellect doesn't just provide damage, it increases your attack, contributes to your HP, and can even fuel thorn or armor mechanics depending on your build structure. It is an attribute that works in multiple directions at once, making it exceptionally efficient for every point invested. The real impact appears when you start scaling it for real. We're not talking about a gradual, predictable increase in damage. In well-made elemental builds, focusing heavily on intellect can literally more than double your DPS. This means your generator skills, the ones you use constantly to maintain combat rhythm, start wiping out groups of common enemies before they can even react. The combat loop becomes faster, more fluid, and much more satisfying. So if you're stuck on a stage or feel your damage is below expectations, before looking for a new item or redoing the ancestral grid from scratch, look at your attribute distribution first. Often, the answer is right there, waiting for you to stop splitting points out of habit and start concentrating them where it truly matters. For the Oracle and similar classes, intellect isn't just one attribute among many. It is the attribute that defines your character's ceiling. If you've spent some time exploring the maps of Dragonkin the Banished, you've probably seen that purple glow on the ground and felt that mix of excitement and curiosity. That purple beam is the visual indicator for draconic items, and they represent one of the most interesting decisions the game puts in front of you. It's not just a powerful item, it's an item with a personality. And understanding how to handle that personality is what separates a good player from a smart one. Their structure is straightforward. 2 positive modifiers that are usually higher than what you'd find on common items, and 1 negative modifier that is always included, without exception. The game doesn't hide this. It puts all 3 in your face when you inspect the item. The problem is that most people look at the negative and discard the item immediately without stopping to think if that penalty actually affects what they are doing in the game. And that is exactly where the advanced tip lies. The negative modifier of a draconic item is only a problem if it interferes with your playstyle. A mana penalty on a build that consumes almost no mana is irrelevant in practice. A movement speed reduction on a class that you position statically in combat is also negligible. When you find a draconic item whose negative falls outside the mechanics you use, you are essentially looking at an item with 2 powerful affixes and 0 real-world cost. So next time you see that purple glow, don't decide based on emotion. Stop, read the 3 modifiers calmly, and ask honestly, does this negative break anything in my build? If the answer is no, you've just found one of the best items the game can give you. Draconic items aren't traps, they are tests of your own character knowledge, and those who know their build well know exactly when accepting the risk is worth every point of disadvantage. One of the most common frustrations in action RPGs with crafting is reaching a point where you know exactly what you want to build. You have almost everything you need, but you get stuck waiting for a specific material that simply won't drop. In Dragonkin, the Banished, the game solves this elegantly, and once you understand the material color system, farming stops being random and becomes surgical. The logic is visual and direct. The color of the crafting material indicates exactly which biome it comes from. Gray materials are from the plains, green come from swamps and jungles, and blue originate from underwater levels. In practice, this means the game is telling you where to farm before you even open a menu. You look at what's missing for your crafting, identify the color, and immediately know which region of the map you need to head toward. However, in the endgame, manually returning to specific biomes can be slow and inefficient depending on your progress. This is where chaos hunts come in as the most powerful tool for this type of farming. Through the Eternal Gift, you can select the exact biome you want to explore, turning every chaos hunt into a targeted farm for the missing material. No wasted time, no hoping for the right drop in the wrong place. So when you're in the endgame and need to scale your crafting efficiently, don't just farm in a loop hoping luck brings what you need. Use the color system to identify the material's origin, open the chaos hunts, select the right biome, and get straight to the point. This is the kind of knowledge that transforms hours of repetitive farming into short, objective sessions. And in games with as much content as Dragonkin, knowing where to put your time makes all the difference. There's a moment in every action RPG where you stop just reacting and start truly reading what the boss is doing. In Dragonkin, the Banished, that moment arrives sooner than you think, especially when you encounter bosses like Jalanong. If you're still trying to survive by backing straight away from every attack or moving randomly around the map, I need to tell you something that will completely change how you handle these fights. Lateral movement, sidestepping, is the answer to most of the sweep-style attacks bosses use. These hits are designed to punish those who retreat or stand still, but they lose most of their effectiveness when you move to the side at the right moment. It's not a matter of insane reflexes, it's a matter of understanding the attack pattern before it happens and positioning yourself as the animation starts. Once this habit becomes part of your play, you'll be surprised at how many hits miss you completely without you needing to use a single defensive skill. But what makes this even more urgent in Dragonkin is the death penalty system. Every time you fall to a boss or in a difficult hunt, the game temporarily reduces your maximum HP. This means the second death is more dangerous than the first, the third more dangerous than the second, and so on. If you chain 4 or 5 deaths in a row without returning to count, you're entering the next encounter with a fraction of your original HP, turning manageable situations into practically inevitable deaths. Thus, the survival strategy here has 2 layers. The first is technical. Learn to move laterally against sweep attacks and reduce deaths within the encounter itself. The second is management. If you die more than 2 or 3 times in a row during a tough hunt, the smartest move is often to head back to town, restore your max HP, and re-enter with a full strength character, rather than insisting on a death loop that only gets worse with each attempt. Knowing when to pull back isn't weakness. It's the difference between actually learning the boss and being destroyed by it indefinitely. If you already have a few hours of Dragonkin under your belt and know the mechanics well, the ancestral grid, divine fragments, symbiosis, the last thing you probably want is to sit down with a new character and go through the entire prologue again, just to get to where the game actually starts. The good news is that you don't have to. The game has an option that most people don't discover on their own, and it puts you right into the endgame without sacrificing anything in the process. The mechanic works like this. By talking to the NPC in Montescale, you can create an endgame group or configure a city directly in endgame mode. When you do this, the character starts at level 3 with free points to distribute immediately, ready for you to build the character you want to test without going through the early stages. The most important detail is that skipping the prologue doesn't close any doors. You maintain access to all the game's bosses and maps normally. What makes this option especially useful is the freedom of experimentation it provides. If you want to test a build variation you discovered, a different attribute combination, or a new ancestral grid setup, you don't need to invest hours of progression before seeing if the idea actually works. You create the group, distribute the points, equip what's available, and go straight to the content that matters to you at that moment. So if your goal now is to grind high-level loot, test builds and difficult encounters, or simply enjoy the endgame without the arrival ritual, this is the most direct route. Dragonkin understands that experienced players have a different pace, and this option exists specifically to respect that. There's no reason to repeat a path you already know when the game gives you the key to jump straight to the part you want to explore. In action RPGs with intense loot systems, a full inventory is a constant reality. You're in the middle of a hunt, the good drops start appearing, and suddenly you're in the impossible situation of choosing what to discard to keep playing. In the Banished, there is a solution for this hidden within a system you already use all the time. And once you realize what's possible, you'll never manage your inventory the same way again. The ancestral grid allows you to position fragments freely across the board, and this includes fragments that aren't yet part of your active build. These are called floating fragments, those that are on the grid but not connected to any main skill, and they essentially function as extra storage. You can store powerful fragments you found but can't fit into your current setup right there, without them occupying any space in your bag. The practical value of this appears especially during long farming sessions. Instead of having to return to town to organize your inventory every time your bag gets full, or worse, discarding a fragment that might be valuable later, you simply park it on the grid and keep playing. It's a clever design decision because the same system you use to build power also serves as resource management without needing a separate menu. So next time you find a divine fragment or a rare modifier that doesn't fit your current build, but you definitely don't want to lose, don't panic thinking you have to choose between it and bag space. Open the grid, place the fragment in a free spot, and move on. Sometimes the best features in a game aren't in systems created specifically for them. They are in how you learn to use what already exists in ways the game doesn't explicitly explain. If you've spent hours farming for that mythic or divine item that never appears, stop for a second and breathe. I've been there, and I learned the hard way that it's not a matter of bad luck. It's a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The tip that will save your time and sanity is simple. Before getting obsessed with the real grind for gear, you need to understand exactly when these items actually start dropping. Starting with mythic items, they do not appear in any difficulty until you reach level 45, and even after that, they only start dropping consistently on Desolation 1 difficulty or higher. This means if you are below level 45 or still trudging through lower difficulties like hard or very hard, every minute spent looking for a mythic item is wasted time. The game simply doesn't allow these items to appear before those milestones, so focus first on leveling up and advancing through the difficulties until you get there. As for divine items, they follow an even more specific rule. They are exclusive to Calamity 1 difficulty and above. It doesn't matter if you are level 50 or level 100. If you aren't on Calamity 1 or higher, you simply will not find a divine item, even by accident. Many players make the mistake of farming anxiously on Desolation 5, thinking they'll get a divine early. But the truth is that the drop type is locked to the difficulty, not just your level or time invested. So here is the advice from someone who has lost far too many hours in this cycle. Stop stressing over drops that won't arrive and direct your energy toward hitting those milestones first. Climb to level 45, conquer Desolation 1, and only then start your serious mythic
mythic item farm. Do the same with the level required for Calamity 1 before dreaming of divine equipment. When you finally reach that point, every hour of grinding will be worth much more because you'll be in the right environment for that loot to appear. And believe me, the difference between waiting for chance and going straight for the target is what separates those stuck in the mid-game from those truly progressing toward the real endgame.
And where others had begged and prayed for divine salvation, these nomads made full use of anything the earth and providence offered them in order to survive. Their master tracker Eula,